people in the West are just so distant from actual conflict. They are so distant from what is actually happening in these places that they do not understand what they are dealing with. If America was taken over by an Islamist organization, and this Islamist organization gained power and started asserting itself and implementing its own policies, the so-called leftists who support Islamists would very, very quickly turn around, because they would be the first who would be killed and locked up. But they don't understand what they're dealing with, which is why they blindly support stupidity like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, why does the Quran say that the land we know as Israel was given to Israel by God? Is Allah a Zionist? And why won't peace talks ever work with the current beliefs of Hamas? And why, as the West sees what Hamas actually says in their charter, why does the West not believe what Hamas actually says in their charter? We're going to get into that today. We're going to continue our conversation with Ridvan Ademir, the apostate prophet, ladies and gentlemen, who again brings his own crowd with him. Here he is, all the way from an underground bunker somewhere in the United States. For those of you who don't know, this is the fourth show we're doing with Ridvan over the past couple of months, and he has explained how he was a Muslim, then became an atheist, then a Christian. If you want to know that whole story, you got to go back to the previous shows. And in the last show we did, we were talking a little bit about the conflict between Hamas and Israel. We just want to complete what we were talking about because we couldn't get it all in the last show. So we're doing this again. So Ridvan, thank you for being with us again. How are you?
Thank you so much, Frank. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you, and I'm very, very happy to be here again, and I'm doing very, very well.
Good. Why don't we start with this question, which is a very provocative question. Why does the Quran say that Israel was given the land that we now call Israel by Allah? Is Allah a Zionist?
Yes.
This is a bit contradictory to what we were talking about, but go ahead.
Yeah, so why does the Quran say anything? I think it's the obvious answer would be that it is a book born of ignorance. It is a book authored by people who didn't know what they were talking about and who were trying to basically appeal to the Jews in their environment initially, and then later on to Christians, right before they turned hostile toward both Jews and Christians. So Muhammad is the main culprit, if we are to accept the narrative as it is, that Muhammad encountered the Jews and tried to appeal to them by learning about their beliefs and what their scripture says, and then basically repeating what their scripture says in the Quran. The funny thing about this is that the Quran is supposed to be the perfect word verbatim of Allah, who spoke all of this long before creation and before time. So it should not be that Muhammad simply or that the Quran simply reflects the things that Muhammad says in reaction to his environment, but that's actually what is happening. So Muhammad hears certain things from Jews in his environment in Medina, where the Jews were initially very prominent before he had them all, executed or expelled because they didn't like his religion. And among the things that he hears are of course, that the Jews have this belief in their connection to the land, to the promised land, to the holy land given to them and assigned to them by God in the Bible, right? This has always been, no matter whether they lived there or not, this has always been a very prominent part of Judaism, historically speaking. So without a doubt, Muhammad was exposed to this and started adopting the things that the Jews teach and believe in, and the Quran then. And he then included these things in the Quran as if they were revelations by Allah and reiterations of things that the Bible says, because the supposed author of the Quran, Allah, the Almighty God, is also claims to be the very same God who revealed the Bible. So he has to somehow stay consistent, and this is what the Quran is trying to do. So the Quran does say in several passages, like chapter 5, verse 21, and others, that it says, "Remember, for example, that Allah assigned this land to you and it says that the land was given to them and that they are supposed to be in that land, and it was given to them by Allah. Now, you could draw some, you could appeal to later verses in the Quran where it also talks about how Allah takes away the rights or the favors that He gave to certain people if they don't obey Him, which is what Muslims generally do. But the Quran itself never actually explicitly contradicts this affirmation of Allah giving the land, the Holy Land, to the children of Israel, to the Jews. So the Quran itself affirms that the land in question, which is obviously within context the Holy Land, the land of Israel, that it was given to the children of Israel, to the Jews.
Which goes all the way back, by the way, to Abraham, as you know. Abraham begins to appear in the Bible in Genesis chapter 12. If you want to go back there, you can look at Genesis 15 and 17 as well. Chapter 22. These are all prominent chapters in the book of Genesis, and many of those deal with the land promises to Israel, and those promises were supposed to be forever. And depending upon how you read it, that land was supposed to go from the Nile River all the way to the Euphrates River, which is a lot bigger than what Israel is now. Some say it might not have been the Nile River. It may have been another tributary closer to Israel down in Egypt. Either way, it's more land than what Israel has right now. And this was supposed to be a land promise to Israel forever. Now, Israel is mentioned several times in the Quran, but Palestine, the word Palestine is not. Why is that?
Yeah, well, so Israel is very clearly mentioned multiple times, often favorably, and then later on increasingly less favorably and in hostile ways. As said, the same concept, trying to appeal to them or appease them, and then later on being hostile toward them. But since the Quran's author, or since the Quran claims that it is authored by the very same God that also, inspired or revealed the Bible, the same God, of course, tries to adopt Israel as a major concept, and mentions Israel both as land and as people over and over and over again. It naturally does not include any reference to Palestine because Palestine is not something that had any relevance to the religions in question, and Palestine is only a name that was given, that was adopted from a lesser name by the Romans, who wanted to rename the official province of Judea into Syria Palestina, simply to spite the Jews and to suppress their identity and their ties to the land. And so it became a Roman thing to call that place Palestine or Palestina, which is why the British later on, for example, adopted that name, because that's the way the Romans named it and how it became known in the Western world in general. But Islam, of course, doesn't have any such respect, because Islam doesn't abide by the Western or Roman language. So it never includes the name Palestine. And by the way, important fact is that when Muslims took over that land, when they conquered the land, they didn't even have any proper name for it. They temporarily, under the Arab rulers, did refer to it by its Roman or Byzantine name and called it Jund Philistine, which is the military rule of Palestine. But then later on it was shifted more and more, and under the Ottoman Empire it was never officially called Palestine or Philistine. It was never known as such under the Ottoman Empire officially for 500 years or 400 years. So that the name Palestine obviously has no relevance in these religions, in scripture, or even in history when it comes to a designation for the land and its people. Among the Jews, it was always known as the land of Israel, Eretz Israel. Jesus himself refers to the places, or refers to the cities as a collective as Israel, the cities of Israel, or the towns of Israel. This is how it was always known. Palestine is rather a modern invention if we are talking about a name for people living there. This only happened in the last 50 to 100 years. And
as we've said before, as you just mentioned too, AP, that name really came from a derivative of the term Philistine, and Hadrian, the Roman emperor in 135 AD, applied it to the land to try and say, Jews, this isn't your land anymore, but there's never been really a state known as Palestine.
Yep.
And as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, AP, but Winston Churchill was really the one after World War I who drew some boundaries, created what is now modern day Iraq and also present day Jordan. And Jordan was supposed to be sort of the Palestinian state, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was. It's funny how that developed. So during World War One, the British Empire, or the British, had this plan of dividing all these territories held by the Ottoman Empire into multiple different territories and start building nations for the people living there. Because their idea was that they would make a deal with the populations, the Arab populations and other populations oppressed by the Ottoman Empire, and would defeat the Ottoman Empire and would take those lands and build nations for the people there. When it comes to Jordan, or Transjordan, the whole territory, which includes today's Israel and also Jordan, was initially considered together and was actually in the 1920s thought to be a new nation that would be assigned to the Jews. This was actually a major decision. However, in 1922, it was shaped further into dividing that entity into two parts, the western part being Palestine and the eastern part being Transjordan. And Transjordan would then be for the Arabs, and Palestine, ironically, would be for the Jews. So Palestine would be the name for the new Jewish state under British rule. And so when the Jews started basically accepting and acknowledging this idea, the Jewish Zionist population also adopted the name Palestine, which is why during mandatory Palestine, when it was under British control, Jews themselves started businesses and started official organizations that they named Palestine. The official Palestine football national team, for example, was a Jewish team of football players. The Palestine Philharmonica was a Jewish organization for music. So the whole idea was Palestine internationally now refers to this emerging or this rebuilt Jewish nation. At that time, the Arab population didn't even identify with the name Palestine. It was only much later, after the declaration of Israel, when Israel decided to let go of the name Palestine and to adopt their own indigenous naming, which is Israel, that they no longer had any use for the name Palestine. So there was a vacuum. And until the 1960s, and specifically the 1980s, it was actually very unpopular among the Arab population to adopt the name Palestine. But in the 1960s, it became more and more popular with leftist terrorist Palestinian organizations. And in 1988, 40 years after the creation of the modern state of Palestine, 1988 was the first time in history that an actual country, an actual state named Palestine was declared officially in name. And that was done by the PLO, by the so-called Palestinian Liberation Organization. They implemented this idea of, okay, let's build our own nation, which we will call Palestine. And that's where it started becoming popular, this whole Palestinian national identity. Prior to that, even the Arabs in the region had no interest in calling themselves Palestinian. They had more of an interest in uniting with Egypt or with Syria or with Jordan and simply being absorbed into one of those nations, or creating a larger pan-Arab nation, for example. So the whole Palestinian identity thing is often nowadays, especially among the pro-Palestine circles, assumed to be a historical thing, but it is not. It is a very recent invention that was actually invented in response to Israel.
Now, you have a video on your YouTube channel, Apostate Prophet YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. We'll put it in the show notes. But you explain what happened in 1948 when the countries around Israel, the state that was birthed in May of 1948, attacked Israel. And those countries told the people that were living amongst the Jews in that area to evacuate so they could then annihilate the Jews, and then those people could move back. Give us a couple of minutes as to what actually happened and why these people that now claim that was our land really don't have a claim to that land. You point this out in the video, but explain it to us.
Yeah, so The history of the Jewish people in the land is actually very complex, and when you look at the history, it is very, very clear that there were always Jews. There was always a Jewish presence, uninterrupted, in the land that you might call Israel or Palestine today. So, especially cities like Hebron, cities like Jerusalem, Jews always existed there. Long before the foundation of the modern state of Israel, Jews were actually the majority in the city of Jerusalem, for example. But the idea of Zionism, supported by the British and initially by the League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations, the idea of Zionism was to make something that was unthinkable happen again, and to finally create or recreate a home for these people in their own land where they have always lived, that has always been historically associated with them. So they started building toward it. So Jews did live in the region prior to the 1900s, but around the 1900s or prior to the 1900s, a big influx of Jews returning to the land started. And the Zionist movement started taking this whole thing very seriously and believing that they can actually do it and actually establish a new Jewish homeland in the historic land. So they did this. The local Arab population didn't receive this very well. Throughout the early 1900s, throughout the 1920s, especially in 1929, in the 1930s, massive riots and pogroms took place against the Jewish population and against British rule and administration. Most infamously, for example, the massacre of Hebron in 1929, where under false pretenses that the Jews are trying to take over and destroy the Temple Mount, they started rioting and massacring Jews left and right. In 1948, and even up until that stage, the United Nations and the British proposed the idea that. So their initial idea was to create a Jewish state there, and the Arabs would simply live as equal citizens. The Arabs didn't want this, and the British slowly realized, okay, this is not going to work out. We have to figure out a different plan. So they tried partitioning the land that was assigned to the Jews, but no option would be accepted by the Arab side. The Jewish side generally accepted the ideas. They even accepted a full partition of the land, where the Jews can declare their own land and the Arab side can declare their own land. In 1947, the Jewish side accepted the final deal for partition of the land. The Arab side rejected and started a massive rebellion. In 1948, in the middle of that ongoing rebellion, the Jewish side then officially, right after the British left, declared the independence of the state of Israel. What happened in response was that the local Arabs mobilized, and the surrounding Arab nations took advantage of the British leaving the territory and started attacking the new state of Israel from all directions. Multiple different Arab countries were involved in this. It was Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and multiple other countries, together with the local Arab population. The funny thing is that Western newspapers at that time, actually American newspapers and British newspapers, referred to it at that time with the titles "Arabs Invade Palestine," which sounds very funny given in today's context. Mm-hmm. So they invaded, and what also happened during that time was that the Arab leadership, which was led by very, very vile figures, including by an imam, by a grand mufti, who was actually an ally of Hitler, to whom Hitler promised the complete eradication of the Jews when he was still alive. Their plan was that we have to somehow inform our own population and have to tell them to evacuate major territories where we will be fighting the Jews. So they commanded them to evacuate vast territories and said, after we win the war, you will be able to come back to your homes, and we will have also eradicated and defeated the Jewish entity, and we can take all the home, and you can have more than what you have now. So with this promise, lots of the Arab population actually evacuated the land, but things didn't go according to plan. Israel turned out to be much stronger than they expected, so Israel defeated them. And there is some nuance to this, to be fair. When Israel was caught in this extermination war where they were supposed to be exterminated, Israel also necessarily took control of territories where Arabs lived and said, for our own security, you have to leave this place for now. And we will have to relocate you somewhere else because we have to take care of our own security. So when the Arab side lost the war, Israel expanded its territories for security and also to take advantage of the situation. You want to exterminate us, we'll take your land. Sorry about that. And but the idea on the Arab side was, wait a minute, we lived in those places, we want to return there. And Israel basically said, no. You're not returning.
This is the spoils of war. You left,
and
your side lost the war, and now you want to come back into the land you left.
Yes. Okay. And from that moment, this whole policy started, which the United Nations shamefully adopted, of referring to all those people who left those territories as refugees. Mm-hmm. And now they have multi-generational inherited refugee status. They live in cities in Gaza, in the West Bank, or throughout the Western world. They live like anybody else, but they have official refugee status with the false hope that in the future they will somehow be able to return to those places that they left, which Israel says will never happen, rightly so. So
I want to point out something.
The story of it.
I just want to put something into perspective here, AP, just for our audience. When you take the 4 countries surrounding Israel, bordering Israel, you take Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and what we call the Palestinian territories, they're largely Muslim, and they contain collectively about 157 million people. When you take Egypt, when you take Israel, which has about 10 million people, you can see that the Muslim populations around Israel outnumber them 16-1. They have 16 times the population of Israel, but they have 63 times the land mass of Israel. And the world says, Israel, you have to give up land. You have to give up land for... What? Wait. You guys have 63 times... There's 63 times more land than we have, and we have to give up land? How does this work? How does this even sound fair? And as we know, in fact, I want to play a video that you did here, AP. It's on your YouTube channel, and it really summarizes what Hamas is all about. We talked about this last time, but this is a very succinct video. We'll also put it in the show notes if you want to go further. Listen to what Ridvan Ademir here, the apostate prophet, says about Hamas and why, after you read this or see this, you're probably going to say, how do we negotiate with such a group? Here it is.
Hamas is not a resistance movement that is fighting for freedom. Hamas literally stands for Islamic Resistance Movement, which is a name that they themselves gave to themselves in order to justify their cause. But their cause does not consist of fighting for their freedoms, it rather consists for Islamic dominance and the Islamic way, which includes, by their understanding, the eradication of Israel and the ultimate killing of Jews. In the 1988 Charter of Hamas, in Article 7, it clearly says that their ultimate goal is to eradicate the Jews as it was promised to them. It declares all of the land as Islamic land that is not open to negotiation, and it describes any attempts by other Palestinian forces to make peace and to negotiate peace as treachery. Over the many decades, Hamas leaders have repeatedly said that they want no peace with Israel, that their goal is to eradicate the Jewish presence, to subjugate all the others, including the Christians, and to establish an Islamic state, or even re-establish the Islamic caliphate. In Arabic, to their own people, they are quite open about this, although they might be misrepresented in the West by university students as a peaceful resistance movement. Believe them when they say who they are. They don't want peace, they want death and destruction, and they should never have it.
AP, why do we in the West not believe these people when they say in their charter they want death to all Jews? They don't want a two-state solution. That's a waste of time. They want a one-state solution. They just want all Jews dead and they want to take the land. Why don't we believe them here in the West? And why do college students and others seem not to understand this? Well, maybe that's an academic question that they're not being taught properly. But why don't we believe when they say they basically want to jihad the Jews?
This is kind of funny because I had the very same question when I went to Israel, because it is not just the Western population or, Western leftists or others or, even conservatives, to be honest, in Europe, for example. It's not just them who do not believe the Palestinians or Hamas when they say that they just want to kill the Jews and take the whole land and get rid of Israel. Israel itself is also very much at fault for that. Israel, in most of its history, had the idea of somehow making compromises, taking land and then giving it back to them in exchange for peace. This was an official policy, land for peace. So in 1967, for example, or in other parts, in other parts of history, the Israeli side would fight a defensive war against the Arabs, would then take massive, land masses, and would then use that land to basically negotiate mutual recognition and peace with the Arab side. And they believe that this is a good policy. And if we are simply good to them, they will also be good to us, and we will achieve peace in the end. Even recently, after those land grabs and land, exchanges, the idea was generally, for example, in Gaza, if we simply leave Gaza and leave it to them to self-govern, and we are good to them and we give them things and all that, it will be fine in the end. They will understand us somehow. And I talked about this with Dr. Einat Wilf, who is an Israeli academic and very sharp on this matter. And she basically explained to me that it is generally a mindset that might be a little bit influenced by the Western way of thinking, that all cultures are the same, others are just like us. If we are good, we will teach them to also be good, and they will eventually understand us and return the favors. And people simply do not understand what they are dealing with. And she said to me these words, for example, they always said, "We want to kill you." But when we heard, "We want to kill you," we always thought, "Oh no, they must be just saying this. They can't mean that they actually do want to kill us all. This must be just rhetoric. They must just be saying this. We can figure something out."
It's just rhetoric because for the past 1,400 years, that's actually what's been going on. So it's not just rhetoric. It's really been happening. And again, this doesn't mean every Muslim believes this, as we always have to say that. But obviously, there are radical elements that do. And Hamas is one of those radical elements. What do you think would happen if a Hamas leader did compromise with Israel? Because it seems to me, this is back in 1993 when Yasser Arafat was trying to negotiate. Bill Clinton, and I want to say it was Barack was the prime minister of Israel back then. Mm-hmm. It was Arafat, Clinton, and Barack. And basically, Clinton and Barack gave Yasser Arafat everything, almost everything he wanted. There was one aspect of this agreement where Israel would only be 9 miles wide at one point. They granted Yasser Arafat almost everything he wanted, and then he rejected it and started an intifada.
Yeah. What
do you think would happen to him if he had said, okay, we'll do this? I think he would have been murdered by his own people. Thoughts?
I agree. And that's basically the general idea. So there are multiple speculations and multiple ideas and interpretations as to why Yasser Arafat didn't take the deal. He basically got everything he wanted. The one thing outstanding was the refugee problem, and that Israel said, okay, we can accept everything you say, but we cannot accept a so-called right of return of all the people coming back and living here again inside Israel.
Security issue too. It would have been a security issue, yeah.
And under different pretenses, actually without giving a proper explanation, Yasser Arafat rejected the deal, although he got everything he basically argued for and asked for. And the idea there is generally that, number one, Yasser Arafat and the leadership, even of the non-Hamas, Palestinians, doesn't actually want to make peace. They simply want to stall and simply want to, work for recognition and push more and more and more until they can get everything they want, and they also enrich themselves. Yasser Arafat was filthy rich, through money that they take from donations sent by the naive world to Palestinians. The same thing is true for the Hamas leadership. They are enriching themselves. They are filthy rich as a result of donations sent to the Palestinians. But the other reason, as you point out, is that Hamas was very clear that if the PLO, also if Yasser Arafat and others like him, who presume to be leaders of the Palestinians, if they actually do make a deal and end the conflict, then Hamas will rise up and fight them to take them down and kill them. And Hamas has enough forces inside the Palestinian territories to carry out assassinations and rile up the so-called nation to cause destruction and killings. So even if a leader among the Palestinians was somehow personally convinced and said, I think we have to make peace. I think we have to accept that we will never get everything we want, so we should make peace. That person would most likely be killed by Hamas themselves. Hamas explicitly rejects this and calls it treason, actually, which carries the death penalty.
We don't understand that in the West, and we need to realize that all cultures are not the same, and people think differently on issues like this, and we have to take them at their word, especially when we have 1,400 years of proof that some people within Islam want non-Muslims dead, and particularly the Jews. AP, I know as Christians, we love all people. We want all people to come to the knowledge of Jesus, and we always have to continue to try and work on an individual level with people we know who are in Islam and other faiths to say, hey, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. He is our sacrifice. But from a government perspective, governments are instituted to protect innocent people from evil, to punish wrongdoers. Doesn't really appear that there's a good solution to any of this. It can't be solved, but I suppose it can be managed, and that's kind of what Israel tries to do. It tries to manage the fact that people all around them want to murder them. I mean, if you were a benevolent dictator and you had some control over this entire issue, what might you recommend, or what might you do? Is there any way forward in this big conflict?
Everything I propose would sound too radical. But I would say that first and foremost, you have to officially acknowledge that that a peace process is not possible, because there is the other side simply does not have the same idea, and they don't have an actual peace process in mind. There is a survey from prior to October 7, actually several years ago, and the survey was conducted by a Palestinian research organization, I think PCPR or PS or the other way around. They asked the Palestinian population, both in Gaza and the West Bank, whether they would be okay if they achieved today a two-state solution along the 1967 borders with Israel. Would that be sufficient for them, or should they continue fighting until all of the land, meaning all of Israel, belongs to the Palestinians? The majority of people who responded to this said that even if they do have complete independence and a two-state solution alongside Israel, it would not be enough for them. They would still continue fighting until Israel no longer exists and all of the land belongs to them. So this is what their own people say. This is what the so-called Palestinian population says. They speak for themselves. Just ask them. They don't want actual peace.
This is being taught in schools.
Yes, it is, and even schools led by UNRWA, which is a United Nations organization for Palestinian refugees, which runs schools in Gaza and the other Palestinian territory. They teach in schools to children that this is basically what they live for. Their ultimate goal in life is basically to defeat Israel and to make all of Palestine theirs and rebuild an Islamic state and things like that. We talked in the other conversation about why Western people and leftist people do not understand this, and why they sympathize and support Islamist terrorist organizations. And when you think about it, I guess it makes a little bit of sense. Israel was mostly led by secular leaders and leftist political parties when it was at its naivest points toward the Palestinians. Today, they have become increasingly more radicalized by their constant dealings with the Palestinians and by their understanding that the whole compromise and tolerating each other and understanding each other thing just does not work out. They have been more and more exposed to Islamists and their kind, which is why they have let go of the idea of just approaching them with niceness and all that. I think there are, of course, multiple factors in the West and among leftists and among universities which are led and infiltrated by socialist, communist ideas, by Marxist ideas, by ideas of the oppressor versus the oppressed, and they will perceive anyone who seems to be an oppressed population or who seems to be a non-white population versus the seemingly white Jews. They will see them as the victims in this case. They will sympathize with Islamists if the Islamists can convince them that they are also against Western imperialism and Western capitalism and Western dominance and all that. But primarily, people in the West are just so distant from actual conflict. They are so distant from what is actually happening in these places that they do not understand what they are dealing with. If America was taken over by an Islamist organization, and this Islamist organization gained power and started asserting itself and implementing its own policies, the so-called leftists who support Islamists would very, very quickly turn around because they would be the first who would be killed and locked up. But they don't understand what they're dealing with, which is why they blindly support stupidity like this.
Isn't it interesting that they will say that we're against Western imperialism when in fact Islam is an imperialistic geopolitical movement? That's what it's all about. Yes. It's putting the world under submission to Sharia law. So they're trying to say, we're against your imperialism, but our imperialism is just fine. In fact, that's what we're going to try and do, is take you over and take your rights and freedoms away in the name of Allah. And
actually, an extremely important point to bring up there, also for Christians and others to understand, is that I grew up as a Muslim. I was as a Muslim, you learn the whole pro-Palestine narrative very, very early on. The role that Palestinians and that the land of Israel, that Jerusalem plays in Islam, is a very, very big one. It doesn't inherently and originally have a big role, but especially later on, after the Islamic conquest of Jerusalem and the expansionism of Islam and its relentless conquest of the world, it plays a hugely significant role. Today, the average Muslim around the world thinks that this is basically at the core of the struggle against the world, Jerusalem. And the idea is that if Jerusalem was fully retaken and the so-called Zionist entity or the Jewish entity was successfully destroyed, this would relaunch the rise of Islam as a major power in the world. Believe it or not, if it happened somehow, I don't think it's possible, but if it happened somehow and Israel actually got defeated and the whole land was united under Muslim Arabs, this would be the greatest signal for Muslims around the world that now is the time to reunite and restart the caliphate and start Islamic imperialism again and start fighting in the way that they did for 1,400 years until they were stopped by the West. So this is not just about borders. It's not just about a so-called oppressed population. It is much worse than that, and especially Christians should never ever fall for the victim playing. They should recognize what is at hand and what is at stake here. This is the Islamic Empire fought foremost against Christians. Their ultimate goal historically was to fight and defeat the Christians and to subjugate them, because the Christians were the major force that actually stood against them and successfully defended themselves against them. If Israel lost that land, all of the mess would start again, and they would once again start a major force to attack us. And this time it's different, because this time you have mass migration and massive Islamist populations inside the West, and you have a very weak Christian spirit that needs to be revived. Under these circumstances, it could be even worse if it happens again.
And ladies and gentlemen, we all know that Jesus, when he comes back, is going to put his feet down on the Mount of Olives, which is in Jerusalem, right there overlooking the Temple Mount. And that land was granted to Israel forever, according to the scriptures. And of course, you can argue theology. There are people who say, no, it hasn't, but I really think it has been. And even without the Bible, you can see that in this dispute between Jews and Hamas are the people that in their charter wants the eradication of the other side. Israel is not saying that all Palestinians or all Muslims or all non-Jews must die, quite obviously, but Hamas is saying that of the Jews. It's in their charter. Again, we will put it in the show notes. If people say they want to kill you, you might want to believe them, especially when they have 1,400 years of proving that that's exactly what they want to do and will do. So it's a very difficult situation, requires a lot of prayer and a lot of insight and some courage to deal with this issue. So thank you for dealing with it, AP, and being so knowledgeable on it. There's so many other links, or I should say videos, on your YouTube channel, Apostate Prophet, on this. You need to go there. You can also go to Apologetics Roadshow. That's the website, or I should say the YouTube channel of our mutual friend David Wood, who deals with this quite frequently and is very good on this issue.
Terrible YouTube channel.
Yeah, terrible YouTube channel, Apologetics Roadshow. Well, he had to give up his YouTube channel because he kept getting slammed by YouTube, getting censored by YouTube. So he gave the whole thing away and he started over. And now it's called Apologetics Roadshow. But Apostate Prophet is up and going strong. So there's a lot up there. So thanks so much for doing that. And Ridvan, is there a website you want to send people to, or just a YouTube channel?
Thank you so much, first off, Frank, for this. It was very, very good. But yeah, right now it's just the YouTube channel, Apostate Prophet. And I'm working on publishing a lot of good stuff this year.
Okay.
Primarily, it is this. You can follow me there. Yeah.
And you do a lot of work with David. Are you out on the speaking circuit at all? Can people come see you speak?
Occasionally, I do give a few speeches here and there. I recently started doing that, actually. And one of the main people who encouraged me to do that was actually Charlie Kirk. But debates, I do debates on modern day debate and all that. But yeah, this is primarily where you can find me. So,
all right, excellent. Thank you so much. It's been an enlightening, even though it's a very difficult subject and a disturbing subject for people. But ladies and gentlemen, you can't deal with a problem. You can't be aware of a problem unless you know what's going on. And Ridvan obviously knows what's going on and knows the history and knows what's happening in the present. So take a look and go back and listen to those 3 other shows with Ridvan. Just very enlightening, very encouraging. And thank you for your insights and your courage in dealing with this issue, Ridvan.
Thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate it. God bless.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you check him out. Also want to point out that we've got some college events coming up. I'm also going to be in Ohio. It's all on the website. I think Ohio is March 6th. Next college event, I want to say, is March 11th. That's at Christopher Newport University up there near Virginia Beach. And there are several others coming up. We're going back to the university at which Charlie was murdered, because we have to put a stake in the ground there and say that, Satan, you're not going to win here. So that's going to be on the 26th of March, I believe. And anyway, it's all on our YouTube channel. Sorry, our website, crossexamine.org. Just click on events and you'll see it there. Thanks for all your support, ladies and gentlemen, and your prayers. Keep them coming. And also pray for Ridvan as well. All right. We'll see you here next time, Lord willing. God bless.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.